Okay, I put my email in, and I'm also on Facebook just under my name.
Oh, cool.
I only just got on it, so I'm just learning it.
Nice. Oh, Regan's joining us. Yeah, so also something I like to do at the beginning of every meeting now is do a land acknowledgement. And I realize that that's kind of hard when we're in a global meetup, because there's so many people to acknowledge. So I kind of wanted to frame this a little bit differently, because I had a conversation recently with a man who is, Catawba, part of the Catawba Nation in North Carolina, and I was trying to set up a land acknowledgement for my company, and trying to get all of the tribes' names right. And he was like, "I think you're stressing out a little bit too much about this. This is something that the Native peoples have been doing for millennia." And it's really more about a connection with the land and acknowledging your connection with the land. So I just wanted us to take a moment to think about our connection to the land, kind of the histories of violence and displacement and migration that have really brought us to the place we're at today. Yeah, and I think it's important to think about too, as we're talking about sustainability and climate change, to really think about how we got here today.
For sure.
So I also wanted to just go over the agenda, and why are we doing this? This is the first time we're doing like a themed global meetup. And it came out of some conversations that I was having with folks across the US, just being really interested in sustainability within their work. And I don't think that this will be the only meetup centered around sustainability. There's already people who are interested in talking more about materials and methods that are more sustainable. So, this is going to be every other month. We're going to have a global meetup on a different theme. So also, if you think about a theme that you're really interested in presenting around, share it with the group, share it with me. I'll pass it along, and we can organize a meetup in the future on that. So as I mentioned, we're going to skip introduction so that everyone has time to present. If you could please, when you're not speaking, mute yourself so that we can minimize the background interference. And also, the purposes of this meetup is to get to know each other. So if you're in a place where it's possible for you to do that, please turn your video on so that we can see your faces. Each of the presenters will have 5 minutes to share their work. We're going to have our group discussion at the end of those presentations. So we'll have about 15 to 20 minutes to talk about their work. So advice I'd give to the presenters is, when you're presenting, think about what feedback you actually want, and say that before, or at the end of your presentation, to say, like, what exactly are you looking for, so that people can kind of think about your project, and then when we get to the group discussion, you'll have really kind of tailored feedback for the work you're doing. And with that, unless anyone has any questions, I want to hand it over to Beth to start with La Ocupación.
Thank you. Good morning or afternoon. It's morning here. I'm Beth Davila Waldman, an alum from 2005, and thank you, Shokai, for inviting me. I have been working off landscapes in Peru for much of my work. I'm going to share my screen, and I will share a selection of works from a current series of mine, La Ocupación. I'll start there. I'm in Marin, Great. Can everyone see this artwork? Okay, great. So, you know, half of my family, my mother was born and raised in Arequipa, Peru. And so it's in the south of Peru. The landscape it's a desert landscape, and it's a place that I've been traveling to since I was a baby in 1975 and throughout my life. And as I've seen the city change, you know, and held different memories of it over time, I've, you know, as an adult, as someone who's considering different themes over time, I'm looking at the landscape and the effect on the landscape and on the people and on the individual as a result of industry. So Peru is the second largest exporter of copper, and it's very interesting. In 2015, I was there and really saw great changes to the balance of home, looking at the commercial and residential spaces and seeing the city change, the city with so many memories. So I work with photography in experimental ways, and I'm always documenting landscape, looking at architecture and the setting as a narrative for what the people are experiencing. And when you're traveling around the center part of the city, you know, being that I'm in the Bay Area, you don't see homeless people, but on the outskirts, you see these communities starting to develop. And this is a valley that my cousin, my primo, Carlos, told me is called La Ocupación, which really became the name of the whole series, because people would leave, you know, really without choice, the center of the city, with prosperity growing from the copper industry. You know, there's, just like in the Bay Area with the tech boom, there's a different balance of cost and their shift. So, you know, in a way, this displacement, which Shokai was mentioning, you know, just in considering our own land and where we're at, like I think about not just where my feet are, but where my family's from. And, you know, I feel like this is my land too. And so it's kind of this displacement and this migration and this squatting in very stark circumstances. These landscapes are, you know, initially without water or electricity. So there people really squat and they're squatters and they, you know, defend the land by gunpoint. So there's elements of violence, and you know, there is a question of sustainability for on a human level, and also there are toxins that affect the agrarian culture as a result of the copper industry. So I work, you know, looking, one could say zoomed out, although that seems to mean something else these days, but like looking at the big picture and then getting more intimate with the experience of the person and their home. So these two pieces, well, all the pieces I'm going to show you today, or am showing you, are all printed. My photographs are printed on commercial white tarp. So I intentionally use the material to speak to the conditions, thinking of tarp as an essential material that provides shelter. So it's become really at the forefront of my canvas to use tarp, of my practice to use tarp as canvas. And here, you know, not only in Peru, but in many other countries I've traveled to, such as Vietnam, or even right out here, you know, in San Francisco, we have our tent cities, but you see this material and this idea of sustaining, you know, some idea of shelter just seems to be at the forefront of what's going on. So this piece is a photo transfer on commercial white tarp, showing more of the coast of Mollendo, where the boats take the copper. And these copper the copper companies are like owned not by local Peruvians, but it's really an international sort of business. So, you know, this is the effect you know, on these local people, this area, you know, from money that's flowing at a global level. And this is another piece from the series that, you know, I use this process that involves tearing the photograph or the photograph flaking and kind of creating the skin-like texture using the material of the tarp, the folds, and the way the transfer comes over has a very skin-like quality that to me interrupts potential sterile element of a photograph and gives it more of that tactile, human, maybe more emotional component. So in many ways, it ties into, you know, what we started with thinking about our landscape, the displacement, migration, the effect on the landscape and the people. And here's an uninterrupted photo, a sneak peek to coming work. But you can see how isolated these homes are, and they usually start without any infrastructure. And if I had more time, I could get into the complicated politics surrounding it, but I know I only have 5 minutes. So yeah, I don't know.
Do you want to share the slideshow with us just so we could like look through, like, can you drop a link to it in the
Oh, sure.
I would like that.
Yeah, I have a link to the series on my website, and this is carried into work. I guess one thing you said to think about what I might want feedback on later is, you know, I've worked off of Peruvian landscapes for most of my work, but at the same time, I really see this experience wherever I go. So my hope is, and Chris, I think you said you were from Indonesia. I had some folks from Indonesia over who really felt touched by this particular initial work, the first one I showed you, and they told me they felt like it was Indonesia. So I hope my landscapes maybe speak beyond one specific landscape, and maybe the experience of migration and global issues internationally and beyond, you know, just my own association with Peru.
Thank you for sharing that. And so the photography, where are you going with the photography project?
Well, so I have 7 more of the images from the same area from 2015. I should have gone back already, but COVID. They're printed on white commercial tarp, and I always have this intersection with paint, with acrylic paint, and the material, the canvas, the tarp canvas is really important to me on a conceptual level.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
I'm working on it.
All right,
Thank
Chris,
you.
do you want to go next?
Yeah, definitely. Let me share my screen. Can everybody see this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, guys. Thank you for having me here, and thank you, Shokai, for putting up this space, you know, where we can like talk about this very important thing. So I really appreciate all of you guys being here. I'm chiming in today from Ohio, the ancestral and contemporary territory of the Shawnee, Potawatomi, Delaware, Miami, Peoria, Seneca, Wyandotte, Ojibwe, and Cherokee people. This first project is called With Every Root, and it's made in 2021, and it's ongoing. I'll read you guys the statement now. The mass of human-made objects had exceeded the weight of the Earth's collective biomass in the year of 2020. The Anthropocene epoch is marked by the significance of human activities that have grown to affect the environment on a geological scale. As the Earth's climate began to change, we are faced with a global crisis. To mitigate the threat of this global catastrophe, we've adapted our ideas around environmentalism, a theory that essentialized the environment as a basis for our collective learning, growth, and survival. as an interdependent system of living and non-living entities. Since human beings have changed the climate, everything on Earth has changed with it. Based on this idea, it can therefore be argued that we now live in a synthetic environment. The notion that the synthetic, human-made environmental system is different from the natural environment suggests a separation between human beings and nature. At the verge of a climate crisis, we understand that there is a need to resolve our thinking of the natural environment under the realization that we are a part of the natural world. The contemporary definition of nature does not rely entirely on the notion of the synthetic versus the natural. Nature is a continuous flow of ideal disposition. Within this understanding, we are beginning to reshape our understanding of environmentalism. The archaic understanding that the notion of environmental sustainability is applicable only to the natural environment will be challenged under the notion of the interweaving of the idea of the synthetic and the natural. The new understanding of environmentalism might rely more on the idea of harmony between transience and preservation, and between conservation and progress. In order for us to strive for institutional sustainability, there needs to be reconciliation between the relationship of the institution and its environment. So the seed metaphor implies that ideas are planted and nurtured over time. By planting the sprouted seed of the world's most massive tree, the Sequoia dendron giganteum, otherwise known as the giant sequoia, within a reclaimed concrete block from the basement of a 19th century Victorian house, I'm nurturing a physical representation of the hope that we may strive to harmonize our collective global constitutions within the greater ecosystem. The gradual deterioration of the concrete aggregate caused by the root of the growing tree indicates the fragility of anthropocentric fundamentalism. The use of concrete block in building materials also represents the notion of construction, deconstruction, and reconstruction, along with the idea of strength and unity. So this is the second project that I have to show you guys today. It's called Portrait of Sequoia, and it's completed also in 2021. Printed using the burnt remains of the parent's hair and collected charred bark of a sequoia tree. Portrait of a Sequoia is a physical representation of my prayer for a collective release, transformation, and growth through the way we struggle in mending our relationship with the world from one generation to the next at the forefront of climate crises. Held in the raised fist of our 2-year-old child, who was named after the pyrophyte, which means fire-dependent plant, is the cone of a sequoia tree. Sequoia was born with an Indonesian father, myself, an American mother, my partner Freedom, on September 16th of 2018, after they moved to the East Coast during the US immigration crisis, following the most destructive wildfire in the history of California. It's not coincidental that the sequoia trees, which distribution is restricted to limited areas of the Western Sierra Nevada in California, is endangered due to habitat loss and, ironically, suppression of wildfires. As some of the oldest, largest living organisms on Earth, each individual sequoia tree provides self-contained ecosystems for scores of species from multiple kingdoms. These kind souls, like ancient cathedrals, have provided not only homes but harmony to countless interspecies families for over millennia long. In my comparatively minuscule human struggle to find a home as an immigrant, I found myself one among these trees, and so my son Sequoia was named. They were born out of fire. As we plunge ourselves deeper into climate crises, there is a serious need to decentralize our anthropocentric thinking and environmental culture. When we understand the notion that human beings are separate and dominant to the natural world, as a residue of colonial thinking, we can begin to negotiate the implication of agencies and rights for the greater living ecosystems within the context of decolonization. We have to accept our universal relationship with the greater ecosystem as part of our identity before we can begin to address the meaning of environmental justice and sustainability. We have to see ourselves in the world and the world in ourselves. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Chris. So do you have a question you'd like to ask for feedback, or?
Yeah, I'm thinking about, what do you guys think? What does environmentalism means to you guys? You know, after what I've said about it.
And I know there's some folks who have joined since we did the introductions at the kind of orientation at the beginning, but we're going to have a group conversation after all the presentations are over. So hold that thought. And we have a couple more folks to go. So next, I'm really excited about this this Beehive tour. Jackson Brinkley from North Carolina.
Hey, can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, thanks for having me and thanks for hosting this. You know, this is cool to see everybody's work and all that and share and stuff like that. It's cool. So unfortunately, it's a little too cold to get in the hive live on the camera today. So I do have a nice video to share with you guys from a past hive inspection. Let me do that. You guys see that?
Hit the yellow box.
Cool. You guys seeing that?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm not really sure how familiar everybody is with beekeeping and stuff like that, but I'll just kind of start from the beginning. You know, we've been keeping bees for thousands of years. People in Africa kept bees, Ethiopian hives, and the time of the King of Solomon and all of that. And so I'm kind of just there's a lot of, as we know, there's a lot of issues facing bees, and there's survival based off of the things that we're doing to our environment as human beings, and not looking at the world as a sustainable place. So I kind of just fell into beekeeping through a friend of mine needing some help with his hives. And as time went on, I started investigating more holistic ways in dealing with the issues that we're facing, primarily colony collapse disorder. There are parasitic mites that are brought in from bees from Europe and other hives where the mites attach to the adult female bee body, and then right as they're going to cap the brood of the baby bee, the mite will drop into the cell of the baby bee and reproduce, and it just it spreads over 36 different diseases and viruses to the bee colony. So this is kind of an issue that people have had a hard time dealing with. It's kind of just the only real, I'm trying to look at it from a perspective of what can we do to boost the bee's immune system internally to prevent the viruses from having an effect that's negative to begin with, rather than treating on the outside of, you know, the bee's body once we have the issue is already present and the viruses are already present in the hive. So primarily my work focuses around gathering and collecting species of wood conch mushrooms known as tender conch or horse hoof or reishi, Genindinum lucernum. These are polypore mushrooms that in humans have shown to have an incredible benefit on their immune system of humans. And so a man named Paul Stamets noticed one day that his bees were going to his garden and chewing on the mycelium of the mushroom. So he wondered if there was not some type of symbiotic relationship going on there, that perhaps bees nested in trees because there was a symbiotic relationship between the fungus present in the dead tree that was hollowed out and the bees. So basically I've been turning, so he started to study this, and in some cases it was shown when the tincture of these mushrooms was added to the sugar syrup, that's a supplemental food given to bees when they need help, the nectar flow might be low, or there's just different times of year where you need to supplementally feed the bees. And when you add a tincture of these mushrooms to the sugar syrup on a dilution of a 1:10 ratio, in some cases, they saw an 8,000% reduction in the viruses affecting bees. So this man, Paul Stamets, he's a big mushroom guy, and he was trying to put this out for people to do, and there was just, it wasn't available, and there was a big delay, and I just couldn't get access to any of this tincture, so I began to make it myself, collecting the mushrooms locally from the same areas where my bees are living and pollinating, and turning it into a tincture, and then feeding it to the bees. And as of this season, the bees that I've given a steady stream of the tincture to throughout winter, throughout going up to winter, they've just the survival rate and the health of the overall colony is just outstanding. Full of honey, full of nectar, just super healthy going into the new year. And so I'm just looking to expand this work really. And I've got some gallons of this tincture, and I'm actually on Monday, I'm going to hear back about whether or not I'll be hired in a new position as a professional beekeeper to tend to up to 100 hives all around the Raleigh area, Triangle area in North Carolina. So and the person that is hoping to hire me, they're very interested in this work and hoping to expand it as well. So hopefully we'll have more scientific research in the coming years to kind of do a better job documenting what I've been doing and kind of proving this as a real viable source for long-term sustainability for the honeybee population. And yeah, I guess
Awesome.
that's about
it. Is there any kind of feedback you want from the group?
I don't know. Yeah, I never really know how much people know about bees and how much. Yeah, so I never really know exactly where to start. But I hope that, I don't know, there's a lot of life cycle stuff and intricacy science stuff that I could get into. But basically, I'm okay.
Okay.
I think I said my piece.
Awesome. All right.
Thank you guys for watching.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, Jessie from California. Yet.
Hello, my name is Jessie. Good to see y'all again. My work, as I mentioned to Shokai, my work is not directly, talking about sustainability, but I'm gonna share. So this is a painting oil on unstressed canvas. And as a transformational artist in my painting art practice, I mostly talk about different perspectives from history, myth recognition, and attitude for futurism. So this was the painting when there was huge wildfire in Bay Area 2019. And when the fire was started near Napa, nobody really expected the wildfire would have went larger. So almost most of Northern California had an effect. During this time, I started studying environmentalism, so I had a lot of fear from it, and seeing wildfire impact and cloud changes that was really scary at the moment. And what I found interesting was changing people's perspectives. So during wildfire, the sky was kind of like orangish yellow all the time, like, you know, all day because it was covered by ashes. And like gradually I saw people started taking pictures and uploading on Instagram. Like, you know, some people, if people visiting San Francisco, then they would have like saying, oh, like San Francisco sky is amazing or beautiful. So I was thinking about like, what is the definition of beauty? And I started playing with what is really urgent based on people's interests. And started this painting with my friend, Oscar Lopez, who's also a transformational artist, about immigration and capitalism. So the sky was kind of metaphor of an issue, what is, you know, that is happening in the society, but not majority of people do not really, you know, pay attention to. So other paintings, my other paintings are more like, I do paint different like female bodies collaged together and talk about like perspectives. And I'm very, in my art practice, I don't directly show it, but I'm really interested in, you know, studying sustainability, and I'm really looking forward to see other people's responses toward it. It was very short, but thank you.
Thank you, Jessie. Yeah, and thank you everyone else for sharing things. I was gonna present last, but I think it would be so much more valuable, I think, for all of us to have a conversation about these 4 artists. And also, I mean, there's just been such a great like demand for talking about sustainability, and I mentioned this at the beginning of our call that you know, we're doing these global meetups, theme meetups every other month, and there will be future opportunities to present your work around that. So maybe I'll present at a future one. One thing that came up for me, and actually a few of the pieces that were presented today was this this idea of like what is environmental art. And I just, from a personal story, I was working in the arts, doing marketing, and I, like, during the 2017 wildfires, I really had my kind of come to Jesus moment and wanted to do something more for the climate. So I wanted to, you know, find companies to work with that were doing work for climate change and sustainability. And what I found is that I've come back to working more with the arts and really seeing how necessary artists are in changing the discourse around sustainability and climate change, because so much of it is so much of the information we have about climate change is scientific, it's abstract, and you know, we're all like kind of storytellers who are deeply embedded within our communities. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that as like, yes, even even if it's if it doesn't feel related to climate change, it is, because also the climate is becoming more and more like bursting into every other part of our lives, you know, whether we want that connection or not. So yeah, I just want to kind of open it up for anyone to respond to any of the questions that the artists are seeking, or anything that came up while you were seeing the work.
Can I talk?
Oh,
This is
please.
Kathy. Yeah, I found it so encouraging. I never really was conscious of how much, well, artists are very much at the forefront of culture. And I'm remembering some artists that I loved that I think might now be deceased, but there was one called Hundertwasser. He's a German artist who did really incredible art. He had a show at UC Berkeley, and this was, you know, long time ago, 30 years ago, and he wrote this thing called the Moldiness Manifesto, and he had a whole different concept of architecture, and he had buildings that had plantings on top of them, like for, trees and gardens and everything. So yeah, and I love the beekeeping because it's wow, really impressive. And what else do I want to say? Back in my time, there was environmentalism with the Sierra Club and all of that in San Francisco, and Ansel Adams, the photographer. And I've always been a nature lover, and it's my belief that we really need nature for mental health and I never realized how important creativity is. I mean, creativity is central to having a progressive, open culture. And yeah, I mean, it's universal, it's international. And we really need that right now. It's even more so a global world. And thank God we're getting into that awareness. So this is very encouraging, and thank you for sharing your work.
Thank you. I was going to jump in and just mention, bouncing off of you, Shokai, because I didn't come into, it's really the past couple of years that I felt like my work is falling into sustainability or much more sensitive to it. And I think like my background has been being a site-specific artist, really with a sculptural background, doing installations and public art. And through it, I just started developing this sort of eye examining things. And so, looking deeper and deeper, I think it's so hard to ignore, or it's so easy to see the effects that are happening, to our land and to the people as a result. And even full circle for me, like using the tarp, while it's the symbol of shelter, and how, it's being used as a wall for many people's homes, as a result of, prosperity. At the same time, like I spent over a month backpacking in the Appalachians in '96, using a tarp as my shelter, and being a nature lover too. And so like there are ways that we connect our worlds, and then can really have a sensitivity to the imbalance that we're all experiencing, that you can see at every level. And so I related to what Chris was saying about the sequoia and the role of the sequoia. And I just wonder if my focus ended up being a tarp as a symbol, but it was kind of what he was saying about the sequoia really spoke to me, the role of the sequoia.
Yeah. I'm remembering I used to have a little tree burl, if you know what a tree burl is, from the pines, and I would put it in water and it would sprout, and it was so beautiful. And I've always worshiped the trees. I love to paint them. I have a lot of paintings of trees. And yeah, I hiked for a whole month in the mountains of Norway, and it was just, wow, I love that country. They really appreciate nature there.
So I just wanted to reflect on, I don't know if I'm saying your name right, Jusun? Great. One thing, maybe you could speak to this. It was where my mind went when you were talking about your work. And also I'm thinking about the role of the artist that plays in change making and perspective introductions of new ideas. But when I saw your piece and you were talking about, this is what I think I heard, tourists and their perception of beauty, and yet the skies were smoke filled. Well, one of the things that we're dealing with here in Nevada County is educating people to bring fire back to the land. And it was making me think about this idea of beauty and changing the narrative around what we're used to, and just how that picture in some ways was really representing that to me, the painting that you showed.
Thank you. Yeah, you got all right. So, and even though I said it, my work's not directly, talking about sustainability, I do believe every issues we do care is proliferated by different issues. So everything is really, connected together, and we can find racism and environmental issue, and like thinking about different countries, how other, the country who have more power is throwing the trash to another country who has like lower power like this. So I don't know, as I think more and more about this, it's funny like that I'm saying is I'm interested in, but there are so many different study, like we still have to study like so a lot. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, just to finish, sorry, Shokai,
No, go
is
ahead.
just the way that we offer educating the public through a first step of visual enticement if there's, if we have an object that we're visually sharing. So yeah, so thank you. All the presentations were incredible. It's great. And Beth, great to know more about what's behind your work, because I've been following your work and I love your work. And so thank you.
Yeah, my next question was going to be, I was struck by like each of your processes have some kind of research involved in them. And I'm just curious, what is your relationship to research around this work, and whether that's personal research or something that's very like scientific, and like as an artist, how do you make research work for you?
I think I'd like to kind of begin by saying that it's problematic when we try to sever this scientific attitude from a personal attitude, because a person who's a scientist also have their own personal biases that goes into their research and observation, and just the whole history behind science that's like deeply tied into hierarchical structure of educational system speaks for itself in a matter of the positionality of science within the work, So again, this kind of goes back into Jusun brought up a really important point about power and how it plays out in our political structure. Is that, when we're talking about power itself, especially the English language of power, we're bounded again by this thinking structure that is tied originally to a very European way of thinking, whereas like in part, this is kind of what makes the issue of environmentalism really hard to discuss, is that we're concerned about the greater ecosystem that spans beyond ourselves, but at the same time we're bringing this issue from a very biased positionality of us as human beings. But also when we think about like how this knowledge are carried out and disseminated through educational system that still exists out of the leftover of colonialism, then that says also something about like how we're engaging ourselves within these issues,
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you, and I think that there's another dimension of that too, that's around like cultural work being emotional work, and therefore not as valuable as more like logical, rational, and that ties into sexism and the patriarchy. I also wanted to bring that up too.
Yeah, it has to do with the value system, quote unquote, that we have. It's like we almost worship science, and art really is like at the very bottom of the hierarchy, and even having a hierarchy as a belief system. And yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
This
And
is-
I always
this is-
admired the Jewish people, and had a very close friend who was Jewish, which was part of why I lived on a kibbutz in Israel. But I was amazed to find out that they were not allowed to own land. And so they survived all that time for centuries because they had a solid culture. They had a solid framework of their own that they maintained. And that made all the difference. But that it was that extreme, really, wow. Talk about victimization.
I'm really curious if anyone who hasn't had a chance to speak have like a burning thing they want to say that.
I just wanted to say to the guy with the bees that he has to look, what's the name of the guy presenting the work with
Jackson?
the bees? Jackson, right. To look up about the island of Ikaria in Greece. They have a very special way of bringing, the bees, and they have one of the best honeys on earth. So it's maybe he can look it up there, and see what they do.
Could you type the name in of the
Yes,
island?
yes, I can. I don't know, in the chat.
And Jackson, you had mentioned too that when we talked that the hive method that you use is based on something from designed from Ethiopia that's not very commonly used, or
not the one that was seen in the video, but maybe I could walk over here. This is called a top bar hive, and it's
oh, we're getting farther away from your network, I think.
It's a long structure, kind of like. No worries. Am I good now?
Yeah, you need to set up like a Wi-Fi hotspot in one of your beehives.
Yeah, that'd be cool for sure. Yeah, it's just a different method, basically. It wasn't what I showed in the video, but it kind of just mimics more the what the bees might find in nature with a hollowed out tree, rather than giving them so much structure like a Langstroth hive. Kind of more replicates the natural world.
Cool. Luba in the chat says that there an umbrella definition of sustainability that we're using as a frame of reference. In my opinion, not for this. I know that definitions for sustainability do exist, and they're often quite contentious and conflicting. But I don't think that we had a definition that we were working on for this with this group. I have just kind of recently been made aware of like how contentious sustainability and regenerative are as terms, particularly when it comes to kind of appropriation of native knowledge and kind of redefining land stewardship practices that came from native peoples as regenerative practices. So I don't know if anyone else has like definitions of sustainability that they find helpful. You want to share?
I can chime into that a little bit. I think that like what you said about the contentiousness about this definition of sustainability kind of suggests that sustainability in itself might be argued as, the umbrella word, because it can mean so many things, right?
Yeah.
Is that the fact that like when we talk about sustainability, like what kind of things are we thinking about sustaining, and this goes from anywhere from like personal relationship, domestic relationship, institutional sustainability, the sustainability of whose lives, is it sustainability of biodiversity, the ecological relationships that's happening in the ecosystem. But I think that the first step towards kind of opening this, like, more getting deeper into this conversation is by acknowledging these definitions first, and kind of getting a common consensus about, like, hey, what are we talking about here? Let's talk, let's establish some common grounds so that we can actually go deeper into this conversation, because language in itself is a common ideas and meaning that is continuously being renegotiated, and the meaning doesn't always stay the same. You know, obviously, as we're tackling the issue of climate crises, when we bring the ideas of, again, environmentalism and sustainability, it's gonna rub people in the way that touches the things that they're concerned about, mainly these days among the ecosystems, you know? So when we talk about, when we use the word sustainability, it's like, in our current times, it might immediately ring a bell in someone's head that speaks about, you know, this discourse of nature and what nature is, you know, and the crises regarding the environment. But at the end of the day, it's a word that we're gonna keep redefining.
Yeah.
Yeah, and going back, I think, to what you had brought up earlier, Shokai, and the word Anthropocene, like Chris brought up in his presentation. But it's just, I think there's, we were talking about scientific research and the role that research plays in our work as artists. You know, is it just an emotional, personal response, or what is our responsibility as far as the back end of research as an artist? And when I was a student at SFAA, like, what impressed me a lot and affirmed my interest in continuing to be an artist was just how many the research and really being responsible for data that you use or reference in your work is very important. I mean, when we went to those lectures and people would spend, you know, years with scientists, or like years, there did seem to be an in-depth, kind of credible amount of research done in order to do work that still might carry an emotional response. So, I mean, I always find myself doing research, you know, on the political and economic level, like trying to understand, like, the actual current landscape. You know, like, I did research on copper mining and the industry and who owned it and the turnover and the politics surrounding it, and the corruption of the political system that affected these squatting communities. And I mean, ecosystems, another word, but, you know, you start, I feel like as artists, you know, people maybe think we don't do research, but, you know, if you go out there and you listen to the lectures, I mean, there's so much research that many of us do. And maybe, you know, like Jackson was saying, I can tell you all about the science, right, that he has with the bees. But, you know, what's our entry point? Like, we're trying to use visual means or sensory means to engage people into dialogue, hopefully, you know, of substance through our art, you know. And then given the opportunity and time, you know, you can go into more depth of sharing the, you know, all of that. So, I mean, my sense is that most of the people, you know, those of us who presented today could hear that depth and the layers and research that's behind the work.
Well said. I want to just jump in for anyone who has to hop off right at the hour, but just to give time for announcements, and then we can stay in the room and chat for anyone who can stay over. But I wanted to just, you know, take a moment to thank all of the artists who presented today. 5 minutes is a short amount of time, and I'm realizing how short it is. So thank you for, you know, helping us, you know, get everyone's art seen and discussed. So the other thing I just wanted, no one's putting me up to this. I just thought it might be a good opportunity to announce that the SF Artists Alumni is now a 501c3 organization. Yeah. So you know, if you found this conversation, you know, valuable to your practice, you know, consider giving back to the alumni network, so that you know, the organization's overhead is very low at this point. We're basically like have a website and some other things, but we're rapidly growing, and also I would mention too that because we're a 501c3 now, there's opportunities for fiscal sponsorship. So if there's projects that you're interested in, you know, seeking grant funding for, you know, consider SFAA as a way to do that. I know that there's folks involved in this organization who have fundraising experience. So yeah, if you're interested in learning more about that, you can reach out to me. I also wanted to just put it out there as like this is a group that's of people, of artists who are interested in climate change and sustainability. And we had a great conversation today. So if you want to keep that conversation going, like maybe we can set up some kind of cohort of artists who are interested in this kind of work and meet up, you know, outside of like a global meetup. But yeah, I don't know if you want to stay around and chat more about that, you can. I also know that Tobin has something that he'd like to announce.
Is that my cue?
That's
Thanks, Shokai. Thanks, everybody. It was really great hearing the presenters today. You guys are amazing. I love hearing discussion around this type of work, especially work that's oriented in sort of sustainability and ecological issues and that sort of thing. I think it's incredibly interesting to hear. What I wanted to talk about is sort of related to that. For the last month, almost a month exactly, on the SFAA Instagram page, we've been doing a curated sort of show where people from alumni from different sections of the world, different parts of the country send in photos or video, or somebody even sent in some poetry about the rivers and waterways in their area as a sort of way of connecting us. Classically, rivers and waterways are connecting elements and communication elements. So it all speaks to that sort of thing. And so we've decided, because it's been so popular this month, we've decided to continue it into March. So if you are interested in sending me through the SFAA Instagram, which I'll put in the chat, a photo or a video or anything that relates to rivers and waterways in your area, especially as it pertains to ecological issues and things like that. I mean, it can go as deep as you want. I would love to feature it on the SFAA Instagram, which is where it lives, but also I poured everything over to the Facebook page as well, so it would get some good exposure, and also just share with our fellow alum where we are and where we live and what it's like there. It's a great way of connecting, and it has been amazing so far. So I would love it if you guys want to join in. Then I'm gonna give you the Instagram in the chat, and you can send that to me, and we'll get you featured. Right now we have people that I plugged in up until the 17th of March. So we've got a few slots left, and I would love to hear from you. That's it. Thanks, Shokai.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any announcements they want to share?
Wish me luck. I'm trying to be a professional
good luck.
beekeeper. Thanks.
That's awesome. So is that with the like Parks and Rec, or is it?
No, it's apiary, and people pay a monthly fee to have a hive in their backyard that we look after, and we visit it once a month and take care of everything. And so
cool.
Right.
Kind of reminds me, I've heard of like you can rent goats to landscape. Have you ever seen that? I've seen that, and I saw that in San Francisco once. I think that maybe the you know, Department of Parks and Rec maybe owns a herd of goats, because I saw them in Golden Gate Park.
They actually rent it out from farmers.
They what?
They rent it out from farmers, and you can
cool.
have goats to like do landscaping, and it goes like all over in the Bay Area.
That's awesome.
Grass it starts growing, like just like a bunch of goats, like, you know, in the back of a truck in certain areas to like eat the grass. It's a really bizarre scene when you like encounter one, just like a bunch
Yeah.
of goats.
Yeah.
They've done that in my neighborhood, and actually our goat herder was Peruvian, so I made him Peruvian food. It was pretty cool. We have goats in Marin, they do that. Like, it's like our whole neighborhood is surrounded by goats. It's actually pretty awesome.
So Beth, I was curious. So I heard in the news around the refugee camps at the border of U.S. and Mexico that are now being emptied out as we're changing the asylum laws in the U.S. And I was wondering if that's like any of the communities from Peru were part of those camps at the border.
You know, not that I'm primarily aware of. I mean, there's a large Peruvian community in Mexico. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't done that sort of research, but it's interesting. It's I'm going to LA a lot more these days, and so I'm looking at that as a site, and more Southern California, and really tuning into broader issues, especially for the Latinx community. And I feel like my research, it will lead me to a lot more awareness, because it's the migration and the displacement, and kind of this effect on people who need a home one way or another, that is becoming more the forefront of my work, and so yeah, I hope to know more. But
can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I've been working, with migration for the last 6 years, and I'm working on this project, the Project Victim, which is an homage. In 2015, here in Greece, in the Mediterranean, thousands of people coming from Africa wanted to go to Europe, and they, Mediterranean Sea became a grave, a huge grave. So this was a huge crisis. And now people are in detention centers, they're in camps. So they're prisoners. All the immigrants are prisoners. So my project is that, I have this, the lists from the people that lost their lives, or they don't know where they are. And I have toe tags, like more toe tags. And actually, I'm looking for volunteers because it's an international, and people, are signing their names or their numbers. We don't even know their names, And this was from mouth to mouth, like how many were in that boat, that sank. And there were 40 more, or 45 more, or 400 people, lost their lives in Sicily at one time. And this is a huge global issue. And what you say now about the borders, and I've been researching about that a lot, and I've been working about that. And about population, movement, as you said, according to the United Nations, 1 in 122 people are displaced, either from violence, from war, or from better life, seeking a better life. So the point is now, so I'm doing this for years now, and I don't know if I can share, in Slack, the webpage that I have for that. But the issue is that, what are we going to do with these people? What do you think, guys? Are they going to be prisoners? Do they deserve this? So my research now is with a guy who's in geography, a scientist that makes maps, is that, do we have place to build communities for these people elsewhere? Should they be intense? There are people, you know, like 3 generations born in camps, in refugee camps. So this is for me a huge issue for all of us, for humanity. It's a humanitarian crisis. And one other thing is that with the pandemic, now we all know what it means to live under a life-threatening situation, don't we? So who know how that feels.
Yeah, and I think that you know, something that often doesn't get talked about with COVID-19 is it has climate change origins. I mean, a big reason why this pandemic occurred is because of encroachment on wildlife.
And this is inextricably linked to the climate change, because there are going to be very soon, you know, climate refugees, climate change refugees. They already are. In Peru, there are places, you know, that are no longer livable, and in Africa too, because they're in the same zone.
Or even like Northern California from the fires, you know.
Yes, yes.
You know, so, it's
so it's so so this is one brings the other.
You were talking about mapping, and I just read this report. It's called the Climate Change Atlas. It's for the US, but it was very eye-opening and interesting for me because you know, there was a big section about immigration projecting into the future, and like you said, there's going to be, they're projecting by the end of this century that there will be 100 million climate refugees.
Yeah, now it's 1%. It's going to be now it's 1%. They live under really, you know, at the edge in Africa and in Peru and in Latin America. In some places, it's 1% that lives at the edge. Like, it's so hot that, you know, it's unbearable almost. But in 2050. It's going to be really hard. 2070, it's going to be the 30% of the population. Where are they going to live? Where is it going to happen? You know, like the toe tags that we're signing now is the same thing. Like, I don't want to be my grandchild on a toe tag, you know, seeking for another land. So this is the point. It's not the point only to cry for the people that lost their lives for, you know, seeking a better life or living a war zone, but it's for the future, mostly.
Yeah, and I think that this map also showed that it's the migration isn't just going to mean everyone moving to higher ground.
No.
Because it's like, for at least for the US, what I was so surprised about was that the migration was going to happen around coastal cities. You're basically moving from one coastal city to another.
But population movement, you know, exists for thousands of years. And that's how we evolved. But here things are so different, you know, the wars that is going on, you know, in Syria for so many years. And all the interests, you know, it's money, money, money. And we know who benefits, you know, from these.
I just want to say that a lot of the indigenous culture and way of living also revolves around immigration, because, you know, they have to adapt to the changing of the climate to be able to survive. And again, touching on the point of like maps and numbers, is like we have to take account, like what Eleni was saying, is that like think about the people that sank on the boat that was undocumented, you know. So when we're actually talking about 1%, like there's some people that like still also unaccounted for in these
I have 30,000, I have 34,000 cases alone, 34,000 cases alone for the Mediterranean. I have I'm researching now from the other side for Latin America. There are 4 central roads, migration routes around the world. So I'm researching, for in the Mexico borders, I have like 4,000 cases. And of course, these are number cases. Mostly I have case numbers, I don't have names. I have very few names. I have some ages, some, and I have a lot of kids too.
Eleni, I'm curious if you would be interested in hosting the next global meetup around immigration.
I would love to do that. I've been researching for so many years, and
Yeah.
I'm at the point now that I might, LFC now, which is a very small city close to Athens, and Athens will be the cultural city of Europe for 2021 and 2022. So I'm going to have, if everything goes well with the pandemic, a presentation there. So I'm building that up.
Thanks for sharing that work.
I'm working.
Yeah.
And please, whoever wants to participate, be not only obliged, but I would love to mail to you toe tags and a list to sign for this and be part of this. It's an homage, to the people that we don't know, but it's us.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that we didn't really talk about today was like just the sense of urgency around the climate and, a lot of these systemic issues and the feelings that all that urgency generates.
Yeah.
And like, where do you find ways to work within that sense of urgency and that sense of despair? And, I think I just came out of a context where like, volunteering with folks who are really focused on climate change legislation in Colorado. And it's so like, you have to respond like within a day, like that's the only like public comment period that they have. And it's just like, there's such a pressure to like, do now, that it's not, going back to the word of the day, not sustainable for most people. So like, I'm really interested in the ways that artists kind of slow that process down, and still do impactful work.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of like share a little bit of personal experience on that. It's like, when we're tackling these kind of discourses that is so vast, and most of the time we feel like it's beyond our control, right? And as we're digging deeper, it's always like one thing is followed by another thing, and then it just becomes this like thing that is so massive that it's almost impossible for us to work with anymore. And that, in a sense, can be very immobilizing. That can be an artist block in some ways. And to me personally, at the end of the day, this goes hand in hand with my relationship with life in general and how I live as a person, my impact to the environment, my impact in one another. And the natural thing that usually follows that is my tendency to retreat to my ego, just like trying to make myself as small as possible. And in a sense, it's like this ego that separates myself from my environment, from one another. But also in that separation is where I find like where I can find my positionality and personhood. And now that this space is acknowledged, it's with the reconciliation between my personal being and the environment, to me, is where art happens. It's like our attempt to kind of like reform this relationship that has been like mushed up and stirred in like this like crazy soup. It's a really complex issue, but it's definitely important to think about. Like, it makes me think about my positionality as an artist, especially someone who thinks about like the environment and our culture that revolves around it, is like, you know, obviously like as a photographer, like when I go in the darkroom and I deal with the chemicals, like I also think about like the
Oh,
chemicals
you
in
print?
the brain and
Wow.
in the environment, and what does that say? But at the like this role that I've adopted in the artist in the first place came from a very specific culture that have taken over different ways of like living. And the reality of the matter is that like our anthropocentric culture, our culture that we're living, especially in the United States right now, has been severed from the harmonious relationship to the environment for a very, very long time. Ever since like we took over the land from the indigenous people, you know. So that goes back into the idea that these kind of politics is also part of the discussion around sustainability and environmentalism. It's impossible in a way to address the issue of environmental issue of the environment without going political. You know, so the very like small things that we're negotiating with one another, the way we try to live our lives, even though sometimes we're not even specifically talking about like um, nature, biology, it's all interwoven, you know? And I think the first step is like, again, reflecting on our positionality and learning about like where we are in the world, you know? And sometimes all that like matters at the end of the day is like to do obviously like what we can, but also to focus on the relationship that just has rippled down from like the macroscopic scale into the microscopic scales in our personal daily lives, you know, how
Yeah.
we treat our loved ones and how we, you know, like do groceries and do our laundries, you know, like all those kind of things, including of course like making art.
I want to, Chris, something that was said here today about research and the research that goes into artists' work. It's so important to see work like that, but equally, it's really important, and this is something that's just been disturbing me lately with the mass media of, you know, how we're supposed to take COVID, how we're supposed to take politics, how we're supposed to take the environment, how we're supposed to take science, is that as an artist, we do have a place where we can explore ideas that come from the self. Not because the self is so important, but you're a living organism on this planet having a very specific experience, and many, many other people are. And it's a very valid perspective. It's an important one to look at. And so, yes, science, not just science, but research-based work is incredibly important, but it's not more important than the way in which we break off and explore things from a human, because that's something, we're all human.
Yeah.
We all have a perspective, and we're just naturally part of the environment because we're made of it biologically and you know, through living. So I would love to see more work, and I'm not the, you know, this isn't my theme, but I would love to see more work where artists, and I look forward to it, that are challenging the narratives that we're seeing right now with science and COVID and politics. It right now, at least in my lifetime, so I'm 55, you know, when I was a younger artist, everything was counter the government. Everything was counter mainstream marketing. And right now I'm wondering where that work is, not because it's different than what I'm feeling. It's because it's such a part of a healthy environment to have viewpoints challenged. Anyhow, I don't want to go on a rant, but that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, I think related to that, I was thinking about like, one big lesson I've had to learn recently around like climate change and equity work is meeting people where they're at, and how much I've been like socialized into this white supremacist culture that's like, I have a plan. I'm going to bring it into this context. I want to check the box, you know, and move things along. And you know, that's the reality is it's much slower, much more relational work that has already been going on. That if you become a part of it, you're now joining the conversation as one entity. You know, so that's been a struggle for me recently, and also with working with other white people.
I had a comment to go along with what Chris was saying about making work that is personal and it's about the environment, and that becomes political. I live in North Idaho, and you can start a casual conversation about the weather, but you better not mention that the seasons have all shifted because maybe climate change has happened, because then suddenly it's political. So you can, you know, we're all planting our gardens different, but we can't mention it. So things become political, even if you're just talking about the personal.
But you know what? That's because we're trained to talk about things in black and white, and we don't realize how much the way we converse with people is integrated into our media culture and all the things that we eat and, you know, we take in every day. I do a lot of work with people who have polar opposite views than me, and there's always a gray area and a meeting place in the middle. If you talk to somebody about, well, do you care that our winter is dry? No matter what their politics are, they care. And so one of the things that disturbs me about the environmental conversation and how we get sucked into it, I don't know if it's a Western world thing or whatever, it probably is that we start talking about things in terms of political views, and our words and our vocabulary indicates it's always about our political position, instead of talking about things, like you said, Shokai, meeting people where they are and talking about it where it's a common thing, and that that the other person's views are not a threat, but that you're more interested in talking about the topic.
Yeah, there's a thing.
Not that you're not doing that, but I just wanted to throw that in.
There's a thing you learn in marketing about, you know, the power of relationships. That, like, I think it's something like 70% of everything we talk about in conversation would be considered gossip. Like, it's talking about other people. And it's also like where we make decisions based on, you know, people we trust. So it really, when you think about it that way, it becomes this false dichotomy between like doing the right thing versus like having conversations about what the right thing might be. Because just by having a conversation, you've like changed your mind. You've had your mind changed by someone else.
When we come to these conversations, these or any other Zooms, there's very rarely do we start saying, everybody who is here might have a different political agenda or ideas. They might come from different religious points of view. They might speak English as a second language. That we're going to understand that everybody here isn't the same. But most conversations I enter on Zoom, there's an assumption that everybody feels the same, the way we even talk about things. So this is part of the environment, the environmental conversation. I don't do environmental work, but I am really intrigued by the presenters today, and just all of this, boy, it's giving me a lot to think about.
Yeah, it gave me a new appreciation of being an artist. That, you know, I've always been an artist. I mean, I've drawn and done that since I was like 4 or 5. It's who I am. And so I never really you know, you don't necessarily get outside yourself to see what's there. And so it's like, yeah, artists are much more open and progressive and open to worldview. And yeah, that's why we're needed right now. We need art and creativity in a big way. right
Well,
now.
it seems like when you look at art or whoever you're looking at it with, it seems like people are able to accept the different viewpoints of whatever you're responding to in the work, right? It's kind of like neutral, like everyone can contribute what they're seeing and connecting to, which then that's different than so many other situations. Like, oh, what do you see? What do you see? Or I see this, I see that, I see, you know, what do you, so that is such a nice space, a non-judgmental the starting ground. And then as we're able to, you know, bring our different perspectives, I mean, that it's just part of the progress will be the dialogue, right? And that's what art can bring, you know, even if it results in very different viewpoints, you know, it can be subjective, you know, which is maybe why, you know, you don't lead with the science in your face, you know, you lead with that connection, the relational or moving or emotional component that can affect people.
Plus,
Yeah, you don't necessarily make assumptions. You listen first. Sorry, I think I'm talking too much. I'll be quiet.
No way.
No. Diversity, anyway, is so beautiful. So,
Yeah.
you know, who cares what the language and the religion and you know, I really, you know, and being able to live elsewhere, you know, than my own country gave me a lot, really. I learned so many lessons, you know, from, you know, standing to my own feet and, you know, from being able to engage, you know, in other situations, talk to different people, love differently, being outside of my own little world, you know, outside of my family's love, and, you know, see things so differently. And that helped me so much, so much. And I had this from my family, not to care about what other people are, you know, and judge them in this way. And I had this basis, definitely. But when I came there, I never asked anybody where are they from or what their religion are. I never thought of asking, or that it matters, you know. I just liked whoever I liked. That's simple as that. And that was so, that's how it should be. You know, we shouldn't care, you know. And maybe we can see things, you know, in a different way and be able to about all these things that we said about the refugees and about sustainability and about the environment. It's a simple thing. It's mostly to help everybody.
Mm-hmm.
It hurts everybody.
Yeah.
By having these people locked up there, by dirtying, you know, our rivers and our seas, and it hurts just everybody. No color, no religion, no. So maybe we should think about it this way.
Art is universal, beyond words.
Oh, yeah. And all of the people, artists and non-artists, yeah, whoever, all of us.
So anyone who is not a presenter today feel like their work has gotten more or their thinking has gotten more sustainable, or like want to do more sustainability work, or reassessing what you've thought of your work as being not part of sustainability?
I will say that I appreciate that Beth is using the tarps and that the integration of the material that is the content of her work is the basis of the material she uses. I think that was pretty cool. I took, as a painter, of course, I got geeky on that.
Thank you. I mean, like, I struggle with it too, like Chris was saying about the dark room. Like, it's also, you know, I think we who use materials as artists, we struggle with our, or I'll just say with how it plays out in creating more things in the environment. And so it's tough, it's plastic. But I mean, then it holds a role. So maybe it can be upcycled. I originally started using tarp and I constructed a tent out of it, literally. Well, I spent a lot of money getting these large photographs printed on the tarp and to make a tent. It was at the parking lot art fair in Fort Mason. And I did create this this tent structure. And so, I mean, I guess you can take my paintings off the panel and they can become shelter. You know, perhaps, you know, that is
it also
new
kind
life
of,
for them.
yeah, and it took them from like this item that we hold painting so precious, and it was now put onto something that is used for building materials or to keep people who don't have a home dry.
Yeah.
Camping material. So I liked that aspect of it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the idea of, again, like the idea of this colonial idea of the art being on a pedestal is also of a far bastardization of like
yeah.
right? And like I really appreciate Jackson today bringing like bees as art. That's like that's awesome.
Yeah, immortal bees.
Yeah, when I studied, that's what I loved about the Sumerian culture. It's an ancient culture, and art. With the ancient cultures, art was a part of their everyday life and very respected and needed. They had beautiful art on their pottery, and when they used the pottery, it was like they realized that they were participating with the earth and taking from the earth through the pottery, because the pottery had images of nature. And yeah, and the very first art was in ancient cultures. I went to some of those places in Turkey, Çatalhöyük, where they had the most ancient, some of the most ancient of cultures. I'm sure there's others in Africa.
Yeah. Yeah, symbology playing a active role in our life too.
Yeah, art being a part of everyday life. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I think about like it makes me think of like poetry in ancient Ireland. And
Oh, I love Irish poetry. Yeah.
Kings would duel. Each king would have their own poet, and they wouldn't fight battles. They would duel with words each other. It was so, you know, just stuff like that. It's so it's so beautiful.
The Irish were real nature worshipers, the Celts.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
That's some of my heritage. I'm a nature worshiper.
Yeah.
I love it.
So Jackson's work is inspired by Paul Stamets, some of Paul Stamets' work with fungus.
Yeah,
and I just wanted to drop this movie.
Oh, and there's the guy that does, I can't think of his name right now. He does the beautiful arches, and he does artwork from nature, and then he does it like on the ocean, and then he waits for the waves to come in and destroy it. It's kind of like
Andy
the concept
Goldsworthy?
of the sand paintings.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
was that Andy Goldsworthy?
That's it. Yeah. I love him.
Yeah, love
He's
Andy Goldsworthy.
incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that movie, Shokai, that you put up there, that I would highly recommend that to everybody. I mean, I think, you know, just talking about us being part of the land and coming from the land, you know, you think about that mycelium, the actual mushroom, like what the mushroom is underground, you know, because the mushroom is just the fruiting body of a larger organism. You know, that mycelium was found in lava in Africa from 5 billion years ago.
Wow.
And they believe that it came from another planet or another star and landed on the earth. And then now it's crucial to the very existence of like everything, you know, without mycelium breaking down, decay.
That's how life started. Very tiny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about fungus as an ancestor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh dear.
And that it's not, it's not even from our Earth, you know,
Yeah.
that it just came from somewhere out in the stars to land on us.
Might have
and
come
then-
from an asteroid. Who knows?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that we are more closely related in our DNA to fungus than to any other living organism, besides like mammals or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
There's no other thing we're so closely related to. And some of the compounds, like the compounds I'm using for the bees and stuff, they don't even exist anywhere else except in that certain polypore mushroom, you know.
Yeah.
And yet it
Interesting.
bonds with our RNA to create antibacterial, antivirus protectant. You know, there's something there. There's a larger story there that, you know, has kind of been hidden from us through time, you know.
I
Yeah.
always loved biology.
Yeah.
I was reading somewhere recently, I think it was in the Systems View of Life, that the sun is actually has been getting hotter and hotter over the last few billion years.
Yep.
But our climate has remained relatively the same.
Hmm.
And the Earth is actually, like, the living system of the Earth is actually creating
bet.
new atmosphere to sustain life. So there's
Mm-hmm.
like an intelligence there. Like, if you know, if we think about like what an intelligence of a global system might look like, but it's still designing this ecosystem to support its life.
Mhm.
Gaia. Gaia. Gaia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, something I thought about with what Chris was saying about just Western science, you know, and then just kind of mentioning science throughout our discussion. Science, as we think of it now, is like a totally Western, you know, construct, where when we think about ancient culture, when we think about the Native
yeah.
Americans or, you know, Asiatic cultures of the past, I mean, you think about the way that they thought about the land, you know, and what
You bet.
it
You
was
bet.
completely their own life. I mean, there was no separation at
Well,
all.
they're
that existed,
totally
you know?
their awareness of it. I mean, think about it. If you're not like we have all these physical structures that separate us,
Mhm.
but it was a pretty harsh life. Not
Oh,
that
definitely. You know, but I think that's part of the trickery. It's like the trickery of our modern day is to think that everything is new all the time. And this ideology of nothing is, all of it's all brand new to us and we're experiencing it for the first time. You know, I think that to do away with that and to really dive into history and the complexity
the
of it.
mystics knew all about it long before science.
Yeah. Samsara, you know, Samsara.
So hi Jane, I just noticed that you joined a few minutes ago.
Oh, hello.
Oh, hi. Yeah, I was curious about this.
So you missed the presentations, but we're just sitting around here chatting after the presentations. But two of the artists are still here.
Okay.
But yeah, we so this is kind of a new thing we tried out with doing a themed global meetup. And so there'll be different themes every other month. I think we talked about maybe the next one being around work that deals with immigration.
Okay.
But to be continued on that one.
Okay.
We also have every other month we have meetups. And are you in the U.S. or are you in somewhere else?
Yeah, I'm in the Bay Area. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Bay Area.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah, so we have a USA meetup next month, the first Saturday of the month. So you're more than welcome to come to that. And I think there's also one for Europe too. Is that right? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, Shokai, I was wondering if I can recommend an alum for the immigration presentation that most definitely
Yeah,
needs.
sure.
Go for it.
His name is Wissam Al-Badri, and I will I'm gonna link his website.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Where is he from?
He's from the Middle East.
Oh, so wonderful. This is great.
Yeah, he just got a grant from the Magnum Foundation, which is great. And he's
Oh,
he
great.
graduated with this BFA from San Francisco Art Institute in 2018.
Is he a
So-
photographer?
Yes,
A photographer. Great.
but you know how it is in SFAI with
I know
Yeah.
exactly how
How
it
is it these days? I don't know.
Yeah.
Still basically the
Do it
same,
all.
Kathy.
The same.
Do it all. Do it all.
Same old, same old. Yeah.
Gotta get my charger.
That's what I loved about it, though, was the openness. I'd come from a
Of
very
course.
restricted place before I went there. The East Coast.
No, my classical Greek eyes rolled when I arrived.
Oh, wow. These are beautiful.
Oh, his website?
Yeah.
I can't see it. Is it
I don't have a
here?
website yet. I'm technically challenged.
but his latest
Maybe
work
I can
essay.
put here.
documenting the relationship between undocumented immigrants and agriculture in California. You know, a lot of these like undocumented immigrants relies on the agricultural industries in California that in
Yeah.
some one way or another also just essentially treats them like slave workers.
I went through that when I lived and traveled in England. I was treated like crap. Yeah,
Oh,
I worked
really?
in a gentleman's club as a waitress, and wow.
Which,
I
how do you-
understand what the immigrants go through because that's how they treated anybody that wasn't English. Not my favorite country. Sorry. Go ahead.
Mhm.
Uh,
Really?
Chris, what,
They have problems, many problems, but they're really, not everybody, but they have this, the British thing, kind of.
Chris, which body of work was it? There's so much. Is it targeting for a safe? No.
I mean, targeting for Safe America is also, I think, a really powerful work. And it's more closely related to the place where he was coming from and this stereotype that that has been attached through media propaganda of the Middle Eastern background in relationship to terrorism that propagates the idea of borderizing in the first place.
Yeah.
You know, the newer work that I was talking about, I don't think
Is it
it's
the sentence never ends?
And yeah, get in touch with him.
Okay.
He's a really great guy, and especially if you just like tell him like, hey, like Chris Manfield like introduced me to you. We're good friends, and
Oh yeah. Wassam's the man.
yeah.
Did you two go to school together at the same time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought there was like a group of you that was like, oh yeah, you.
Yeah, this worked out really well. Yeah, Chris and I have a history for sure.
All right.
Good guy. Much love for the man.
Yeah, I miss you, man.
Yeah, for sure. I'm gonna go back and look at your website a little bit. Cool.
Yeah. So how did you hear about this event, Chris? It's on social media or?
Someone posted on the Facebook group. I believe it was
Okay.
Grace, that posted it.
Cool.
Yep. And yeah, I just saw your contact in there, and actually, just like as you see, like I emailed you like the day where the kind of application.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad you did. I really appreciated your what you brought just for everyone to think about.
Yeah. Thank you so much for curating the space, and I think that these kind of communications and just like also like new relationships that can be like that can form out of this kind of meetings is like what makes
I put my project there for whoever wants to
Okay.
see. It's Project Victim.
Is it, oh, it's at your website? Is it just your name for your website?
It's a web page for the project.
Okay.
I just want to thank you guys again before I have to leave right now, because I still have to actually, I'm an international student, and I'm using I'm on an F1 visa, and I'm like in the middle of
you are? Oh, you are in
so
an F1?
Yeah, and I have I have a child who's born a United States citizen because my partner is a US citizen, but I can't stay without a visa, so it's become like
Oh my gosh, I was in F1, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My girlfriend from Israel and France, she had that problem. She had to periodically actually leave and go back to France and come back again back in those days.
So I have to do that right now and just like go like to the office and like print out some paperwork, and I just want to thank you guys again. And it's nice to see. It's nice to see you again, Jackson. We haven't like like it's I realized like his name was on like the email, and I was like, what, like catch up with each other again. So it was like, it has been really good. Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. It was really great meeting everybody. Really fun. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, everybody.
Peace. Oh dear. Everybody does
Always.
that to me. Okay.
Yeah, great. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing this.
Yeah,
you
maybe
have to know that all the people in Ikaria and in Greece that they have great honey, they consider themselves artists.
All right.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, I've always thought of this as an art for sure.
Yeah.
Especially when you line up all the jars of honey and they're all different colors.
Yeah. I noticed that the hives were really beautifully painted.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Great.
All right.
That's really cool.
Take care, everybody.
Paint,
We
like,
look
Take care.
forward
Thank
to
you,
the next
different
one.
Shokai
people,
and
like,
everybody.
different kinds of things, so that was
Okay.
fun.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, bye-bye.
Are you guys heading out?
Bye-bye.
I think
I'm
so.
going.
All right. Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shokai.
Bye.
Thank you.
Take care.